that's good, yeah. Yep.
All right, I think we're ready to get started. Our last session of the day is to go from flooding to fire. All right, so our first application session for the last period of the day here is the wildfire application. Presentation by Todd Lindley, who is the SUE at Fort Carroll office in Norman. We'll follow his presentation up with a panel discussion to follow. So we'll go with that.
Todd and Rob.
Yes. Todd and Rob.
So yes, like Dave said, we're going to go from flood to fire. No better way to have a highlight the workshop this afternoon, I guess. Chad and I thought that really the best way to describe the GOES-16 wildfire application was to tell a bit of a story. And this is a story of a firestorm that occurred on the Southern Plains in this past March the 6th of 2017. You know, most people, when you think about wildfires, you're thinking the western U.S., right? And then forest fires out west, you're thinking about California, Idaho, Montana. Not too many people think of the Southern Plains, but in reality, the ecosystem of the Southern Plains exists because of fire. And it's something that's been lost for a number of decades on the plains. But it is reemerging in a big way. And this past March, on March the 6th, we had a major fire outbreak on the plains. It's an all-out firestorm. Summary of that event would include 32 major wildfires across portions of southwestern Kansas, the northeast Texas Panhandle, and northwest Oklahoma. Those 32 fires that burned that day accounted for just under 1.3 million acres burned. And to put that in perspective, the devastating Sonoma and Napa County fires in California that we've all just heard about in the news, I believe burned around on the order of about 250,000 acres. So in one day we burned 5 times that amount on the Southern Plains. 87 structures were destroyed. Unfortunately, we had 7 people who died and 5 folks that were injured. To put this in a historical context, this was the largest individual fire outbreak in the modern era on the Southern Great Plains. The previous record was held by an event in March of 2016, so just over a decade ago, burned about 1.1 million acres, and that one resulted in 12 fatalities. So a few less folks that lost their lives, unfortunately, in this one, but that's still an incredible fire event. Really an unprecedented characteristic of this outbreak this past March was the fact that we had multiple mega fires that occurred. A mega fire is defined as a fire that burns more than 100,000 acres. And what was so remarkable about this is that actually 2.9 really, we had one that burned 93,000 acres in Turkey. So 2 fires eclipsed that 100,000 acre mark in a single outbreak. And prior to this, we only had 10 mega fires in the modern era documented in the Southern Great Plains. And yet almost 3 occurred this one day. The Starbuck fire, which you can see began in the eastern Oklahoma Panhandle and moved up, burned into southwest Kansas. That surpassed a mega fire that occurred just 1 year previously in 2015, the Anderson Creek fire, to become the largest fire record for Oklahoma and Kansas, both states. The Perryton fire here in the eastern Texas Panhandle was the 3rd largest fire in Texas history. And we do know that fire occurred on much larger scales than this historically on the plains, but we have to rely on anecdotal evidence. We know of one fire in November of 1894 that began in northeastern Mexico and spread across the northwest Texas Panhandle and burned approximately 6 million acres, according to Dr. Stephen Pine, who is one of the world-renowned fire historians. One of the largest fires, if not the largest fire, documented in North American history, and it occurred on the Southern Plains. So these are a very unique phenomenon, these plains firestorms. And I want to talk a little bit, give you a little background before we go into the satellite data and its utility on how we forecast this type of event. And basically the weather systems that spawn this type of fire on the plains are basically the same ones that spawn severe storms and convection. And as meteorologists in the plains, certainly in my office at WF Oklahoma for many years, we've definitely had a large interest and a high degree of focus on the warm, moist sector of the mid-latitude cyclone when it passes over the plains like this. And for good reason, it's where we get plenty of high impact weather, severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, supercells, and as such. But if you look back to the west of the dry line, over western Oklahoma, and in this case, western Texas, you see what is basically convection occurring there too. So those are massive wildland fires. That's the Swinson fire from April 2011 east of Lubbock, Wildcat fire further to the south, and then you can see fires all the way down to the deserts of northern Mexico there with that system. So, there are definitely meteorological reasons to be focused on the warm, dry sector to the west of the dry line as well. And one thing I would point out, so on this particular day, April 14th of 2011, this very dynamic system resulted in high impact weather and damage, both east of the dry line and to the west of the dry line. We had tornadoes in eastern Oklahoma that did damage. Most of them were weak to strong. Maybe you have one, you have two tornadoes, roof damage, minor exterior damage to some homes and structures. But all damage with wildland fire is the equivalent of 5, and it affects a much larger geographical area. So in this state, the Swinson fire, in contrast, was wiping homes down to the foundation and everything was consumed. So I just want to point out that discrepancy between the two impacts. Beginning in 2006, after the first round of these very widespread violent fire outbreaks started impacting the Southern Plains, I partnered with Jared Dyer, the Storm Prediction Center, Greg Murdoch, and a few other fire-minded meteorologists on the plains, and there weren't many of us at the time, to start studying the synoptic patterns associated with these outbreaks. And we initially composited a case of 10 outbreaks from late 2005 to 2009. You can see the dates in the lower right. And developed this overall composite that can be used to help forecast these events going forward. And basically they're associated with the attraction of a shortwave trough over western Kansas, a deep surface low over north central Kansas, and a dry line that extends south along the I-35 corridor, typical mid-latitude cyclone. What's unusual though, if you look at the isotherms, you see an 80-degree isotherm extending all the way up into central Oklahoma. And if you look at the dates, these are all full season type of dates, winter and early spring. So these systems are anomalously warm and dry in the warm dry sector south of the cold front. So while Chad is switching us over to the cave view here, that gives you the background of what type of pattern we generally look for to help forecast these type of events. So we're going to start the story now on March the 1st, and this is a 6Z GFS run, initialization at 6Z on the March the 1st, and we're going to look out in time, and it looks like what we're currently seeing is Monday, March the 6th at 12Z. So if you would, Chad, let's just kind of go forward in time, and you see this deep trough out over the Mountain West, and you can see that the trough begins to eject over the central and southern Rockies at about 21Z on March the 6th. So again, this is a 135-hour forecast. And as Chad zooms in here a little, what you really start to pick up on the fact that the trough is ejecting, and you have this narrow tongue, if you will, of high temperatures in the low levels indicated here. The surface temperature is the image. So very warm surface temperatures over the upper Red River Valley, western Oklahoma, eastern Texas Panhandle. The 850 isotherms are indicated here, in black, and you can see the sharp, low-level thermal ridge, if you will, from the Texas Panhandle up through western Kansas, with temperatures that range from about 20 to 18 degrees C along this very sharp and highly amplified low-level thermal ridge. And if Cheb put the 500 millibar isotax on there, you see this intense core of mid-level speed max over 100 knots coming over the central New Mexico Rockies and just starting to nose over that low-level thermal ridge. And that has been an indicator. Once we identify the large-scale synoptic pattern, this type of signature has been a strong indicator that we've been able to use to forecast the epicenter of many of these violent fire outbreaks on the southern plains, looking at the precise location and the evolution of the low-level thermal ridge and where the mid-level speed max is ejecting and overspreading that low-level thermal ridge seems to be the epicenter of these fire outbreaks. And we've used that with success for about the last 5 years or so, but we have not, until now, had not really identified what the physical processes were that made those features so important. Based on that exact imagery that you were just seeing there, the 60 run of the GFS, I actually sent an email on a group online forum, Google forum, that Greg Murdoch and I met down in Midland and myself operate. This email was directed to the Texas A&M Forest Service and the Oklahoma Forestry Service, and basically indicated that we had a high level of concern for a fire outbreak occurring on March the 6th, based on that model output that you see. And of course, we know now what happened on March the 6th, and the end result of that, of course, was some strategic preparation from those state agencies, and all of this was basically summarized very eloquently in a Texas Monthly article, which really focused on 3 victims of the Eastern Forest Fire in the Eastern Texas Panhandle: Cody Crockett, Sloan Everett, and Sidney Wallace. They actually perished in the Eastern Forest Fire trying to protect the Franklin Ranch herd, their cattle herd, basically, from that fire. And even though the gist of the article is about the tragic loss of those victims, and it's very much their story and the story of what happened to them in the week leading up to that, and then meeting their deaths in that fire. But the backdrop of that story is actually the sending of that email based on that GFS output that morning, and the fact that a small group of subject matter experts were looking at this 6 days in advance before the firestorm occurred. And one of those remarkable twists of life where your career and your profession intersect life, Cody Crockett and Sidney Wallace were actually good friends of my sister, and Cody was to be the best man in her wedding this past summer. So this tragedy really struck home. You can go forward, Chad. But the response from the state agencies that we were able to influence in providing some strategic decision support in advance of this system was something like this, and this is an example of the probabilistic significant wildfire outlook predictions that we were providing to the state agencies. And then you can see the list of resources that were basically mobilized in advance of the system. So up to 20 dozers, 27 engines, some black box and air assets, you can see, were mobilized to the locations indicated by the stars. So that gives you an idea of big picture, the type of resources that were brought to bear by both the state of Oklahoma and Texas. And I do want to point out that, giving them this kind of lead time is it's essential to mobilize those kind of resources. These type of resources have to be mobilized. The thought process and the authorization to spend money and move men and metal, that all has to occur on time scales much broader than our typical fire weather watches and red flag warnings. So with that, I think we want to go forward now to Chad to Kate. And we'll fast forward now several days from March the 1st on to the morning of March the 6th, the morning of the fire outbreak. And of course, this is the low-level water vapor imagery, and also observations were plotted here. And I think, you know, you can see it's not terribly dramatic just yet. You can see the veering downslope winds coming out of the southern Rockies, spreading over the western plains, southwest Kansas and the northern Texas Panhandle. One thing that does stand out in the low-level water vapor, of course, are the very deep lapse rates that are also spreading east across southwest, south central Kansas and the eastern Texas Panhandle. But the main thing I want to point out here is that we're at 17Z, so 11 a.m. And how many fires do you see? None, right. So this is the day we're going to burn 1.3 million acres at 11 a.m. There is no fire. So with that, I think that's the end of the first session. Chad,
Yeah.
I'm going to take a few questions about kind of that backstory.
All right, questions for Todd up to this point. We'll start with the audience here first.
Yeah, so I guess at the end of that particular loop, there's a couple of, I guess, alarm bells that might be sort of going off right there. You have such strong low lapse rates already in place there. You got a tremendous amount of dry air, as evidenced by the water vapor loop. And I'm looking at the natural air wind field in there, and it's quite impressive out of the southwest, and certainly implies you got a lot of pretty strong mixing going on. At this point, what confidence level do you have that it's going to be a very significant day for fire weather?
It's a good question. Yes, we were very confident at this point. We've been looking at the synoptic situation from a pattern recognition standpoint for the last 6 days since we initially raised alarms to the Texas A&M Forest Service in 4th Street, and the model solutions have been very consistent all the way through the last 6 days. And at this point, looking at the latest satellite imagery, you can see that band of steep low-level lapse rates there and very dry enhancement, and also the onset of the winds now overspreading the western plains. So it appeared that everything was absolutely on track. There had been 2 minor fire outbreaks preceding this on February 23rd and February 28th. So we had an upward trend in the fire activity that was actually observed on the plains. So we knew our confidence was quite high going into this event that this was going to be a very problematic day. I will admit we didn't quite know that it was going to be historic. I think in our decision support to the state agencies, we indicated a 50% probability of significant fire. And we actually thought we were going out on a limb by saying there are likely to be fires greater than 10,000 acres. We underestimated that by a few orders of magnitude.
Todd, can you just talk to everybody about how you could have all of these conditions in place, but unless a fire occurs, and how they occur, most commonly in the plains. Can you just elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I think it's a misconception. A lot of people think fires are all started by lightning. In the plains, more than 90, maybe even more than 95% of all wildland fires are not started by lightning. In fact, they're cool season wind-driven fires like this. It's very common. Probably our most prolific fire ignition source on the southern plains are the winds marking power lines and causing sparks to go into the heavy fuel loads and grass loads at the surface. But you can run, it's amazing the gamut of ignition sources that you have. Power lines, definitely the most common. There was one instance on this particular day, a lady was using an ATV to clear out a driveway, and the metal grate that she was pulling plowed behind her, hit a rock and caused a spark, and that ignited a major wildfire. I've seen instances of people trying to steal irrigation pipe for the copper out in the field, and they're sawing the irrigation pipe, and that starts one. A light fixture at a Little League baseball stadium caused another. So, I mean, you really never know. And in fact, the longer that we study fire on the plains, what we have learned is that you should assume that an ignition source is present.
Hey, Tom, quick question. Chad, maybe you can go back to the help. You had a bullet over there with probabilistic forecasts that are on halfway down, 52 probabilistic outcomes, which I'm guessing you're showing to the left here. Can you elaborate a little bit more on A, whether those are subjective or objective that they produce, and B, how do these relate to red flag warnings and other sorts of
Okay, yeah.
products?
By current requirements in the National Weather Service, they're a little disconnected from red flag warnings. What we're providing is an experimental service in a very specific political environment, being the Texas A&M Forest Service and Oklahoma Forestry, which tend to operate a little independently of the national infrastructure. But these are basically subjective based on subject matter expertise of a group of 4 people. And I can actually believe that, yeah, there's some statistics there and some bullets talking about the amount of effort from the time fire outbreaks began the first indications of potential fire outbreaks on February 16th, looking ahead at numerical weather prediction and seeing similar patterns show up all the way through April 3rd when the risk really subsided. During that 45, 60-day period, the four subject matter experts exchanged almost 1,900 coordination texts. That's more than 40 a day, and I far exceeded my teenage daughter during that month on their texting. I'm ashamed to say. But there were a total of 52 of these probabilistic outlooks that we issued for 4 major events, including 138 text discussions that went along with those.
All right, let's take some questions locally first. Anybody have anything they want to ask, make a comment on that?
What were the fuels that concern?
Absolutely, the fuels are always a concern.
Are they always
Yes.
give us their requirement?
Yes, there are ways to measure that. I'm not going to go into that today because we're not using GOES-16 for that application. But there are many ways to measure the fuels. We look at precip anomalies from the growing season into the dormant season. On the plains, we've had a lot of success with. If there are any fire-minded folks other than Robin that are aware of this, energy release component control model G has a huge degree of correlation to significant fire on the plains and elsewhere. And it's basically one of the national standard fuel models that we're using. So yes, we knew that we had heavy fuels and that with the antecedent conditions would be favorable for fire going into the season.
So I just wanted to add on to that although we aren't talking about the fuels necessarily today in the case study, I do think GOES-16 could add to fuels applications that we have not yet investigated.
All right, back up to slide Go. The color curve water vapor bandit has struck again. So I guess this person is curious as to whether or not you're happy with the default water vapor color curve in DPD.
Or is this your preferred?
Or is this what you use? Yeah.
Yes, this is my preferred water vapor. This is the curve that I see most of our folks using. Although when we get into talking about the fire-specific curves, they're becoming a lot to pick from. And I've not found anything used consistently amongst the staff for fire. So that's an area that we have new ones. We have RGBs now that we did not have during our fire season on the plains. So I think we still have some experimenting to do with those.
All right, next question appears asking you to elaborate a little more on the antecedent fuel conditions, pre-green up, end of winter meetings, or drought in place, things like that. So
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, this is late in the dormant season, before the green up, before the spring green up. We see a remarkable decrease in our fire activity around mid-April on the plains due to spring green up. Question about drought. That's one note. There were a few small areas of deep zero abnormally dry. But one thing we also see in the plains that fire does not necessarily correlate with drought. In fact, many times it is the very initial symptom of a developing drought, because it's really that transition from a wet growing season into a dry dormant season that instigates fire on the plains. So it's not like a timbered area where you need prolonged drought that really readies those large diameter fuels over some extended period of time. We don't have that in the grassland.
all right, back to slide No. Maybe this gets a little bit into social media or other kind of public DSS that you all did ahead of this. What type of warnings were issued to the general public, for instance? Please be careful, dispose of cigarettes, report fires, etc.
Right. Well, of course, we had fire weather watches and red flag warnings in effect well in advance of the system. Of course, SBC was also issuing. They had their outlooks had extremely critical. Many of the state forestry agencies in Texas and Oklahoma both issued public statements in advance of big systems like this to tell people to prepare for extreme fire conditions. There are particular statements from the Oklahoma Forestry Service that were issued to their firefighters highlighting certain safety messages immediately in advance. So there's pretty much an all-out, public safety blitz before a day like this to notify folks and let folks know that, yes, it's a red flag warning. Yes, you've seen that before, but this one is a little different.
Okay. Anybody else here before we move on? Yes.
Probably just working on there. It's all, fuel grass, but our controlled burn rate, same ability to express the scene before they occur, or is it pretty much not an option there because vegetation is so good?
Can you repeat it, Todd?
I think the question, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you asked if controlled burns are effective at reducing the overall fire threat on the plains. Because of the large events that we've had in the last decade on the Southern Plains, it is very difficult for landowners to do controlled burns if they are not popular at all. There are a few prescribed burn associations that have developed, and we just had a major incident on March the 9th, 3 days after this outbreak we're going to look at today, where a couple of firefighters were very severely injured because of prescribed burn in the Eastern Texas Panhandle. So there's a stigma against that on any large scale plains. We could go into a whole other session. Could be how the fire regime on the plains is changing, but basically it's being unhinged by invasive woody species like eastern red cedar and mesquite, and it's the loss of pure grasslands that are really allowing these huge conflagrations to develop.
Okay, let's move on.
All right.
Okay, so now we are fast forwarding, or actually we're starting at 17Z again, so we're at 11 a.m. local time, and I think we'll just run through a loop here, Chad, and start to see the very initial signs of fire starting to develop. The first one was actually the Starbuck fire, which began in far northeastern Beaver County, Oklahoma, and then you start to see several other fires initiate across western and southwest Kansas, also a few in northwest Oklahoma. Now, the Starbuck fire, this is actually WFO Amarillo's CWA, and much of the early part of the event was in Amarillo's and Dodge City's CWA, and then it spread eastward into the WFO Norman area. But we'll probably focus largely on this western part, the initial onset of it. What we see here, of course, this is a very initial bright hot spot with the Starbuck fire. It went on to burn about 665,000 acres or so through the course of the day and the evening. We also start to see other fires developing. I'll point out one or two, like this one up here, Pratt, Kansas. You can see there that the surface or the brightness temperature of that particular fire is not too low. Can you sample that? Yeah. I'm sorry, not overly hot compared to like the Starbuck fire. Okay, we'll let it run through and then Chad will sample that. But I believe it's going to show up around 35 degrees C or so. And yes, just when it's a black spot there. And then you might compare that to the initial temperature of the Starbuck fire. So about 34, no, that's not, there we go, 45. I noticed someone mentioned earlier, and it may have been Chris, talking about how things look different in season to season and day by day with the flooding. The same is true with fire. The temperature that you sample these fires varies dramatically depending on the environment and the environmental conditions. So, we'll talk a little bit later about some of the hotspot detection notifications we're providing. And there are always questions about could that be automated through an algorithm, and I think it would be analogous to using the tornado vortex signature on the AED. You would get a lot of false alarms, and there really is some expertise I think that go into interrogating satellite imagery frame by frame and seeing how the pixels change to identify real wildland fire. Of course, this is an extreme example. Another thing I'll point out here, I don't have quantitative science on this, but what we have seen anecdotally is that the cirrus plume that you see from the eastern Texas Panhandle across northern Oklahoma, south central Kansas there, it seems any time that we have a reduction in the insulation, you reduce the dread of significant fires on the plains dramatically. And there have been many cases that we've seen where significant fires do not develop until that cirrus plume pushes off to the east. And in fact, we do see one fire begin near Cherokee, Oklahoma, here in north central Oklahoma, right on the back side of the cirrus plume, but then one more band of thicker cirrus moves over, and we lose that fire. So that actually seems to be an important factor. It's fuel insulation on the fuels and on the fire environment.
Todd, talk about like the morning. So this is like 11 a.m. We start this loop. Talk about like the morning that day, and like what your forecasters doing, and things like that.
Yeah, you bet. So we'll talk a little bit about the operational environment in Norman on this day. Clearly, it's a highly anticipated fire event. Offices, I'm sure, in Amarillo, Norman, and possibly Dodge City were doing a lot of decision support leading up to this. Unlike Ariel's case this morning, where you have a lot of precursor indications in satellite imagery before the real hazards begin, you don't necessarily have that in fire. So one thing that they're doing is reaching out to folks, probably doing special webinars. I know we did special webinars to indicate, to communicate what the threat is on this particular day to our local fire chiefs and emergency managers. And also, as far as preparation for this type of event. So with the wildfire notifications that we started doing in Norman and now Tulsa and Amarillo, and actually about 29 WFOs across the country now have access to that app. What we would be doing at this point, before the fires really get going, we would have one person at least, and usually two people dedicated to analyzing the satellite and radar data. They're basically interrogating satellite and radar data much like they would for severe convection, except they're looking for fire and not thunderstorms. We also would have someone dedicated to the NDFD grids to make sure that those 1 to 3, 1 to 6 hour grids are as precise as they possibly can be, because we're going to have spot forecast requests, and you also are sending weather information with the notifications. So you need to make sure that those grids are very precise as far as wind, relative humidity, temperature, and any other impactful fire parameters. Of course, we would be monitoring local broadcast media, and we'd also be monitoring some of the scanner traffic to pick up if any of the fire departments out there are being dispatched to fires. And that's important to us too, because we do not send notifications for fires that the fire departments are already dispatched to. Our notifications are supposed to be a first notification.
Anything else you want to add, or should we open it up for questions now?
Well, so, we want to do the notification part now?
Let's take a break.
You want to take a break?
Yeah, let's do some Q&A and then we'll leave it.
Very good.
Okay, we'll open it up to the folks here first. Let's see. We'll go Karen, Jim, Scott, Phil. Let's see if I can remember that. Karen.
Yes.
Yes.
Just from an aviation standpoint, just curious if anybody in the room can answer this. We're very much interested in what tops from the plumes of the smoke are like. Is there a way to use GOES-16 that could give us that answer?
I don't know if anyone else wants to take a stab at that, but from an operational standpoint, I can say that we have had more success looking at ADAD radar data and then doing cross sections in GR to find the plume tops. Now, our fires do not get nearly as tall, since they're wind driven, they do not get nearly as cause of plume-dominated fires out west. So someone else may have some thoughts.
I see no takers. Okay, we'll put that one in the parking lot for now. We'll move on to Jim.
Yeah, this is Jim. You know, Todd and I have talked a lot about these fires. One thing that is amazing is we used to get a lot. Anyway, one thing that really drives us nuts is that there's no performance measure reported to Congress for fires, and so it's hard to get funding. We were going to do it. You know, we're going to get grading done, fire detection, and also forecasting, and we got. Do it. It was the interesting. But I do have one question. This is in regards to the plumes themselves. Do you worry about, let's say, firestorms, or what kind of situation would result in something where you get large fire vortices or other things that would literally turn the fire into something much more convective than typical?
Yes, in fact, on this particular day, we had pyrocumulus on the Dumas Complex fire, the Panhandle, I believe also on the Starbuck fire. And then 3 days after this, I mentioned the prescribed fire incident in the Texas Panhandle. The details of that incident were that there was a very large fire tornado or fire roll that developed with that fire and basically engulfed two firefighters that were very severely injured. So I do worry greatly about that. You know, in a wind-driven fire environment, those type of convective processes are usually not as amplified as they are in the big fires out to the west in the timber areas. But in an extreme case like this on March 6th, we did seem to have pyrocumulus and those type of influences. And I would say largely that's not very well understood in the plains. You don't see it that often. I know we had the fire here in Lake Thunderbird that impacted you there, and that pyrocumulus we did. But it's not as common in these wind-driven type of scenarios.
I'm just kind of curious about the staffing that's required for this. I mean, if you have a fire going on and farther down to the southeast, you have severe convection. How do you cover all that stuff?
We absolutely do, and thanks for asking that, Scott. It's yes, we've had cases in the last few years or so, because like I said, the same type of systems that spawn our severe weather can spawn fire. You know, conditions are right to the west of them. So there have been times that we've had both severe convection in the Northern CWA and fires ongoing in the west, and we literally split the operations area right down the middle. The north side of the operations area handled severe convection warnings, and then the south side handled the ongoing fire scenario. So as far as staffing, it is a workload increase. You know, we basically staff as it would during a severe weather event. So in a higher end type of workload scenario, we could have 10 to 12 folks in the operations area.
Yeah, I remember this day pretty well, and one of the things that I recall, right, is there's a wind shift about to go through the western plains as well, and curious if you were able to use different channels on GOES-16, or that was a combination of observations to really time that wind shift. That'd be really important for the partners.
No, in fact, you cannot overestimate or underscore the importance of that, because towards the end of this scenario, this review, we'll look at that wind shift blowing through some of these fires. And you're absolutely right that is probably the most important bit of information that you can provide to the firefighters and the emergency managers once fire initiates out there. And that is also a characteristic of these Southern Great Plains wildfire outbreaks. Since they're associated with mid-latitude cyclone, there's always going to be a wind shift approaching that fire, by evening, late in the burning period or that evening.
Yeah, and Aaron and his forecasters at Dodge City, track that pretty well. You can see it, the imagery is still a little bit we only have certain
front did not move through most of the major fires until about 2 to 3Z, and we'll take a look at that.
You can see it show up pretty well here in IR.
But a common practice for us would be to disseminate graphics that show the timeline of the wind shift through those fires, once the fires begin.
All right, we'll go to Ken and then we'll go to Sonia.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you have typically a person on the shift doing analysis. And I was just curious what that analysis consists of, since there's so many different data sets and different sources of information and so forth. For example, is it typical that you automatically got a 3.9 channel in terms of satellite data, and, or is there some other procedures you follow in terms of analysis?
Well, generally it's all based on 3.9. I think now that we're getting new data sets, a lot of the derived products for fire did not come into our operational able to provide our fire season. So we got very little experience with that. Same with some of the new RGBs. But so we've been traditionally using 3.9. Mostly has stuck with that. There are times when fire initiates, say in the Oklahoma City metro area, that your first indicator is going to be a minimum in the CC on the dual pole data. So we are also, don't discount the importance of radar too, especially at this range.
Okay, let's take a couple of Slido. I'm going to start in the middle real quick. Back to the DSS piece. It seems to fit in with the time frame here right now. How does the brightness of the fire temperature play into your DSS messaging and that sort of thing?
The truthful answer to that is I don't think we know just yet. Clearly, our confidence is much higher when the brightness temperature is higher and higher. But that we also have to apply some caution to that because one big fire episode we were expecting this past April, a very bright signature developed in Canadian County to the northwest of Oklahoma City, mid to late morning, around 9:30 in the morning, and our forecasters instantly issued one of the notifications for it, and then in 2 scans it was gone. And we followed up with Oklahoma Forestry and the Canadian County Emergency Management. We found out that was actually a burn off of excess gas on an oil rig. And now that we know to look for that, we see them all the time. And of course, that's a point source, but it's burning at about 3,000 degrees. So we're actually able to detect that. And that's a very high brightness temperature, but provides no DSS values.
All right. So we noticed, of course, you're looking at the 1 minute imagery here. How did the 1 minute imagery, the meso imagery, improve forecast and awareness versus the 5 minute CONUS? And of course, maybe the natural extension of that is the office request another sector of that.
Yes, we always go through the process of requesting rapid scan or now MSD in advance of these fire events. And we usually request that through the Southern Region ROC, and we usually send that request the day before. So before we're expecting a big fire event. How does 1 minute make a difference from the 5 minute? We started using the 1 minute with the SRSOR, the GOES-16 back in 2016, and what we immediately saw, you see much fainter signals, you see flickering, literally flickering of the fire before it really takes hold and starts to burn intensely. And that does, sometimes, we've all been around the forecasters when they're making warning decisions for severe convection. They're like, I'm going to hold off one more scan, and see what the trend is. You hear the same thing with fire. They start to see very subtle little flickering in the pixels, and they're like, I'm not 100% sure, but it might be, and then all of a sudden it takes off and it's very bright. So that's the difference in 1 minute is made versus 5 minutes. For our fire customers like Oklahoma Forestry, they started telling us, even if your confidence is very low, please send that notification immediately because they need every minute they can to tactically attack these fires and get resources on them before they spread.
Hey Dave, can I add to that? This is kind of a neat success story where Todd contacted Catherine and me, and when the priority list first came out, he said, hey, I think that was the fire conditions pumped up. So we got on the phone and talked to it. I can't remember how far up we were, but it did get raised to a higher level, and I think that was a really good exchange of information to create the priority list and have this as high as it should be.
noticed the date on this, right? March 6th.
Right. This was 4 days after GOES-16 data started flowing in the weather service.
Right, and I remember walking over to the Storm Prediction Center on February 28th. At that point, they had some imagery flowing on the screen in the conference room to see the fire that day out in West Texas. So yes, this is immediately after.
All right, let's take one more from Slido here. You mentioned, I guess, earlier on RGB. Should we be using RGB or just a shortwave IR band in this kind of?
Probably use both would be my recommendation. Like I said, we don't have a lot of operational experience with the RGB, but in post-mortem, looking at this event, highly impressed with what we're seeing on the RGB. There might be some very subtle, signatures that's talking about the flickering that stand out a little better than the traditional 3.9.
So we're going to show some of that.
We'll show some.
But this is, they weren't using the RGB, wasn't available.
Not available to us on March 6th.
Right.
Okay. All right. Let's go.
Okay, so I've already talked a lot about these notifications that we're sending from WFO Norman. Like I said, we have consistent coverage for these across the state of Oklahoma now with WFO Tulsa, WFO Amarillo, and it's great. I hate to say, use the pun, it's spreading like wildfire, but we've had requests from, I believe, today 29 other WFOs around the country to get access to this application, which was developed, and it lives on the B Lab, and that's where you can access it. A little story within the story here. February 18th of 2016, Bill Line, who used to be the GOES our liaison at SPC, came over to the forecast office and gave us a heads up that one of the GOES-14 SOR sector would be over the plains for an extremely critical fire event expected the next day, which was February 18th. So this was going to be the first time we had access to the 1-minute data in operations, and we were expecting a lot of fire activity that day. I walk in the next morning, and the Oklahoma Forestry fire chief called and happened to ask, can you guys let us know every time you guys see a new fire? I know in the past you guys have given us a courtesy call, and that's very helpful. And my MIC, Dave Andrew, actually stated, with the new SRSOR, with the 1-minute data flowing into AWIPS today, we need to innovate. So my first stop was at Aaron Anderson's office. He's our ITO, otherwise known as a wizard, and a very innovative ITO that we have that develops a lot of very useful applications around the weather service. And he came out in the operations area and started working. And 3 to 4 hours later, we were sending notifications live to the forestry when we detected new fire. So I want to kind of quickly walk through how the application works. First of all, when a forecaster identifies a new hotspot showing up on the satellite imagery, he selects the points tool in AWIPS and drags a point to the location of the hotspot, as you can see there if you go forward. And then you open a local application within AWIPS called the Hotspot Text app, and this GUI, this is actually the previous generation of the application. There's a newer one now, but a GUI like this opens up, and you tell it to add a notification, and you select your point. In this case, we were using point D, and then there's a fire level. The forestry services decided that they wanted us to provide a confidence level that what we were seeing was a wildfire. And I really didn't want our forecasters just, putting their thumb in the air and saying, I feel like that's a 30% probability. I wanted them to do something quantified. So what we decided to do was to tell them information about the environment and also the method that we detected the fire with. So the fire level is the category of an index called the red flag threat index, and that's, you go forward one and we'll come back, Chad. This is a red flag threat index in GFE, and it's basically a parameter, a real simple parameter modeled after the Haynes index, except for wind-driven environments on the plains, it basically quantifies the climatological rarity of combined relative humidity and wind. And it actually very well mimics the SPC fire outlets that we found. You know, elevated, they usually have an elevated. You know, if it's critical, they usually have a critical. And then there's an extreme and then a historic category as well for the really high events. So that just tells you our forecasters glance at this, at the hourly NDFD grids to see what the red flag threat index is showing, and that's indicated as a fire level. And again, that's a measure of confidence, as is the detection method. If they detected it with 5 minute, 1 minute, 15 minute, or maybe radar, you can actually indicate if it was detected with both satellite and radar. And then you put the subject line in there, wildfire, hotspot, whatever, and then under comments, that has on there 1 mile southwest of Seward. We used to actually type in the physical location. We don't do that anymore. That's automatically generated. And then you generate the text. And once you generate the text, it looks like this. You can select. You usually have several mesonet sites that you can select from that give you the proximity weather for that spot. In this case, we selected Guthrie. And you can see the geolocation with the lat long method detected and the proximity weather. And it's sent and it goes out. And I can tell you, many of our forecasters, in fact, a number of them have indicated they can send one of these out faster than they can send out a severe thunderstorm alert. So it's very efficient. Instantly sends a text message to a contact list that you can see down there. The check marks are indicating who it's going to go to. And it also, we've also worked with the state of Oklahoma to have it interact with their GIS system. So if you go to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. This is what would appear on the situational awareness display at the state DOC at the state capitol. And not seen here, but what you do see in an active fire event, they also have all their resources plotted on this map too. So you can see where all the air assets are, where the task force are located, and generally where all of the firefighting resources from the state are relative to the fires. And then they can actually go in and color code the little flame icon to give us feedback on whether a fire was confirmed in that location or not. So we can look at this fire developing just north of Amarillo, and this was actually given by 4 days after GOES-16 became available in AWIPS. This was the first day that Amarillo began to use the hotspot notification app tool, and they issued one on this fire developing just to the north of Amarillo, developed right off the highway. There were like 2 ignition spots right along the highway, and it was, I think, determined that this was probably from a truck or a trailer that had a chain or something dragging on the interstate. Ignited the newest complex fire just north of Amarillo, and on this day they were frequently getting about 15 minutes advance notice to the local fire departments with the hotspot detection app to these new fire detections over 911 calls. And in 2016, our first year to do this in Norman, 78% of our notifications were received and dispatched prior to 911 calls, and generally with about 5 to 10 minute lead time. Now we send ours directly to the state forestry. Amarillo was sending theirs directly to the local county emergency manager, so they were actually getting a few minutes advance notice over us because they weren't talking to a middleman.
So Todd, one of the things we talked about is when we looked at this, when did you feel a forecaster would actually go through the process, right?
Right.
My question was, would it be here? Because obviously, sample, there's probably something going on here.
Right.
Would it be here? Like, can you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. And if you go back like 3 and then kind of look through it a little bit, you can see kind of this flickering or this gradual increase in brightness temperature that we were talking about earlier. In this case, it doesn't really flicker back down, but it's just on a gradual upward trend. So if you go back one, Chad, I think that's probably the point where a forecaster would issue one of these notifications after think there was some very faint signal there before, but it's not really actionable. It kind of looks like the noise, you know. But the forecaster would have identified that. They would have seen that very faint signal, but their confidence just wasn't quite high enough. Once it darkens to about 40 degrees C there, which, you know, I'm not saying 40 degrees C is a threshold. I don't believe there are any thresholds like that. But at that point, I think that stands out enough that a forecaster would probably be issuing a notification, and by the next minute, it's not this.
Right. And that's every, I mean, this is 1 minute interview.
And remember, they can generate this, you know, within seconds.
Right. And you had talked about they want to know immediately, right? Like, so it's, you know, 35, as soon as they feel like it's going to, like, if there's a fire, they're sending it. So they'd rather have a higher false alarm some of these days.
At this point, that's the feedback that we're getting. Is a slightly higher false alarm is better than not knowing, because, you know, you're looking at extreme rates of spread through fine fuels with these type of events, and the faster that they can get an initial attack on that fire, the odds are increasing that they will have some success. On a day like this, March 6th, it's very important to point out that the environment is such that you're just not going to have a lot of success. But on the 2 outbreaks prior to this, February 23rd, February 28th, we had very similar weather features, but the fuels had not yet accumulated, had that cumulative drying effect that took place in a 2-week period. So, you know, part of the fire triangle was a little lopsided on those prior events, and they did have tremendous success knocking down and suppressing major fires in those events. Each of those events, just as a comparison, burned between 15,000 and 20,000 acres, and this one burned 1.3 million. So there was clearly, the fire environment was very ripe on this day, and there wasn't much you could do until the weather shifted.
All right, so there's some questions. Actually, I want to start with second from the bottom, since it kind of goes to the notification tool in the fact that we're looking at, you know, 1 or 2, 3, 4 group of pixels. Have you gotten feedback at all with regard to the geographic accuracy of your reported detections?
Yes, we absolutely have. And is that one slide in here, Chad, of Randy issuing one of the notifications?
No, I don't.
Okay. It actually has a GIS plot of the fire and then where our point was located. And in that particular case, it was off by 1.93 miles. And when you're using 2 kilometer, you know, resolution data, I think that's about what you should expect, 1 to 2 mile accuracy. There have been other cases, you know, where it's been much closer, but a lot of times that just depends on exactly where the forecaster puts the point.
Yeah, just do a follow-up. How important is that, right? So if you're off by 1 mile, is it sort of like, well, they go into that area and they're obviously going to see something? Like, you see whatever I'm going?
No, absolutely. In the plains, you know,
it's not a needle in a haystack here, right?
No, they're seeing smoke. Generally, I think they're seeing smoke as soon as they roll out of the fire station, you know, from these. They're usually that close. Maybe this is a good time to point out, we did have one success story where one of our forecasters finally saw a very subtle signal, and he went ahead and based on that request for low confidence notifications, he sent one. And the local fire department got out there, and it was a fully engulfed farmhouse, and it was in a rural area north of Oklahoma City, and there had been no 911 calls or anything on that structure that was fully engulfed. So we're amazed with, you know, the resolution and what you can see.
All right, so for the audience local here, Phil, actually, Phil, I walk up to you.
Yeah, I'm not sure you can answer this, Todd, maybe one of the other people here can. I'm just curious what the land surface temperature product will do with these anomalies. Is it going to throw them out? Is it going to show up? Does anybody have an idea on that? Because it would be cool if it showed up, and another way you could look for it.
I would defer that to the expert.
I do not know definitively. I would speculate that it might be tossed out because it would be above a threshold of a very tight grade, but I don't know for sure.
And I'm not sure how often the land surface on a meso is generated. I know it's generated hourly at CONUS, but there's that too.
With that, Melissa thinks about
I think I've heard some talk of maybe possibly trying to automate some of these detection systems, and I'm curious what your thoughts on that are. I mean, when you're pointing out changes, those are pretty subtle, and I'm wondering, you know, maybe some forecast, I'm not trying to take the forecaster out of the loop, but some of them may not be as vigilant as others, so I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, I think one, situational awareness about the environment, our environment is key to our forecasters, and for them to be aware and vigilant enough to detect these. And that's what we base a lot of these notifications on. You know, we don't send notifications from every fire that we detect. We send them when we detect fire in a critical environment, basically. I made a comment earlier about, yes, I think, you know, I've heard a lot of talk too about automating this with algorithms, and I think that would be about as effective as automating tornado warnings with the TBS algorithm. Yes, it could be done, but do you really want to do that? Those are kind of my early thoughts. And not only are some of these very faint, subtle signatures, but they vary from day to day based on the environment. And I think that would make it a challenge. I think you could develop an algorithm that could serve as a safety net, absolutely. But whether you would actually push a notification based on that, I think is the question.
Yeah, kind of as a follow-up to the last question. Do you know of any agencies that are getting the data and monitoring themselves? Obviously, this is a workload on the earth forecasters, but yet they're obviously monitoring. You know, they're looking at the data anyway. But is there any activities going on outside the Weather Service to monitor and get this data and use it?
Right. We were contacted by the Washington State Forestry Agency, and they have a small staff of like 3 meteorologists, and they have AWIPS, a version of AWIPS, and we determined it would work on their system. And I do not believe that they have it yet, but they have contacted us and expressed interest in that. And yeah, I think long term, what we're providing is a proof of concept for the states as WFO function. I think it's, you know, should be decided much higher than my opinion. But I think long term there could be other agencies, land management agencies that do this. What I guess my area of concern with that would be their training on remote sensing, and you know, I think there's an important role that we serve as meteorologists in that we not only have a good handle on the environment, but we also, you know, are experts in remote sensing using these platforms.
So I looked it up. The meso refresh rate for the land surface temperature is every hour. I'd say if you want it more frequently, you should make that request.
Thanks. Scott, we'll go to Steve, and then Slido, and then we'll
Sorry. I just want to make a comment about a future capability for GLM that you may or may not be aware of. It's been hypothesized that we'll see continuous illumination of a pixel when we have continuing current. We know continuing current rather than polarity is what's important for fire condition. And we have 2 examples from early February. It was when we had severe storms in southeast Texas, so we're still undergoing tests. But continuing current was verified independently by a low-frequency receiver that Duke University operated 1,500 kilometers away from where the discharges were, and we did verify that we had continuous illumination for many tens of milliseconds. So while we've been telling Weather Service maybe this will work, it may be a won't, I just want to make sure you were aware of it, so that once GLM is provisional after January, it's something that, you know, we can use your help to look out for, so we can see if that actually plays out and if it happens often enough that it happens.
Sure. I was not aware of that. Sure, we'll be glad to help any way we can.
All right, we'll take the last question here from Slido. It's been for a while. Does the heat of a fire have implications for its spread or acceleration? Does it become more right to predict as it gets hotter?
burning temperature of the fire, and in general, the rate of spread is more correlated to the actual size of the fire, and of course, somewhat to the wind as well. So, I think they are all correlated. It's a matter of kind of the chicken and the egg thing, you know. Basically, the more intense the fire is, the hotter it will burn. We know that some of the most intense grass fires that we have in the plains will burn at about 1,000 to 1,100 degrees or so. So, I think the best way to answer that is just to say the larger, more intense fires are going to have a hotter burning temperature, and therefore are probably more prone to having greater rates of spread. Okay, so it looks like Chad has us zoomed in there on the Starbucks fire. Okay, so this is starting around, this looks like it's a route from about 17Z through 18Z or so. We're looking at a Starbucks fire, kind of the initial phases of it, spreading out of Oklahoma into Kansas. And we have 3.9, 2.22, 1.6, and then the RGB, fire temperature RGB.
And this is not a display that you guys were using.
Right, we do not have access to the fire temperature RGB yet. But as I believe what we want to point out here, you can see the smoke, of course, in the 1.6, right? And also you can look at, you know, we're talking about the gradients here. You can look at different pixels that are indicating different brightness temperatures by using a 4-panel approach like this, even though we did not on that particular day. One thing I would point out here, you know, these are roughly 2 kilometer pixels here, and there's not fire everywhere there. So, you know, you're getting radiative effects also in the debris plume and smoke, of course. But it seems that you can, with higher precision, indicate where potentially the head fire is, and you get a better idea of the structure of the fire, you know, with some of the gradients that you see certainly in the fire temperature RGB, as well as the 2.2 there, and to some extent even in the 3.9. And that actually turned out to be a very important component of GOES-16 that day. The Texas A&M Forest Service fire analyst Brad Smith was deployed in the Texas Panhandle. He was on the Dumas Complex fire, and one of our IMETs, Greg Murdoch, was relaying to him some information about the GOES-16 data, and he was able to basically track down the head of that fire as it moved across the county roads from Potter County into Carson County. So I think, you know, we certainly sold him immediately the power that this new GOES-16 is going to have in tactically helping firefighters on the ground.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that any of these pixels that is illuminated greater than 45 C is a part of the fire.
Right.
But in reality, it's probably a very small
in reality, Chad, what you have here is an elongated, you know, burning area with very long parallel flanks, both on that are parallel to the wind, both on the northwest side and southeast side, and then you have the real active fire is at the head of that. This is where you have the longest flame lengths and very erratic fire behavior. So it's more of a horseshoe shape as it fans out.
Now we're going to jump ahead.
Chad has for us now is a similar 4-panel from roughly 0Z, we go to 3Z, 2Z.
Yeah, 2, 0 to 2.
Okay, yeah. So go ahead and let this, why don't we pan out get a whole event, still the whole event. So we had the question earlier about the wind shift moving through these fires, and of course the Starbuck fire is encompassing about, at this point, about probably 650,000 acres from the northeast Oklahoma Panhandle and southwest Kansas. It looks like at this point the wind shift is already through it. And what you see that what was the more inactive southeast flank of the Starbuck fire has broken off into numerous head fires that are heading southeast with that behind that wind shift. And then you actually see the front progressing into northwest Oklahoma there at the end of the loop. And you see it at the Puritan fire right about there. And you'll start seeing individual head fires spreading from the Puritan fire down to the southeast. And let's see if we can see it in the fire temperature RGB. Right there at the end of that loop, you start to see this U-shaped area, this major head fire heading south. That's actually moving down into the Canadian River Valley. And if this loop went another hour or so, and we really focused on like 130 to 3Z, you would just see incredible rates of spread as that moves into the river valley. And it's very hard to tell. Even at this resolution, it's very hard. You get a very good idea of where the head fire is, but you still don't know exactly where it is. And if we look at about a 1 hour period, probably from 2 to 3Z here, it appears that head fire may be moving about 10 to 12 miles an hour down the Canadian River Valley. Puritan fire. Right. Yeah.
A couple frames of bad data.
So the fastest rate of spread that we've documented in our research on the plains was with the Rock House fire down in southwest Texas in April of 2011. And the Texas A&M Forest Service documented a rate of spread of about 6 to 7 miles an hour with that fire. And if we were able to confirm, this 10 to 11 mile an hour rate of spread on this fire, clearly that would effectively double what we thought was some of the fastest rate of spreads that we could see in a plains fire.
So this is basically 80 minutes. And we did some distance speed.
We did do distance speed, came up with something between 10 and 12 miles an hour over a 1 hour period, which would be.
But people, and rightfully so, there's people that are skeptical about that because it's way faster than.
It's way faster than anything we've observed in the past. And if you read some of the literature on rates of spread, some of the calculations done on that by Rothermel and others back in the 60s and 70s, it's theoretically possible, but it's just faster than anyone, in this generation of folks that study this sort of thing haven't really seen. So what you're seeing here is basically the immediate aftermath of the wind shift. And initially, before the wind shift went through, you had maybe a fire head on the east-northeast side of this fire that was very aggressive and burning, probably across several miles, maybe 3 to 5 miles at most. Now you're left with, if you use the home tool on there, Chad, and measure out from the west side to the east side of that fire. You measure out from all the way out here on the western extent, all the way to the far eastern extent of Higgins.
So
put the home cursor way on the left side of the fire, right out there.
Okay.
And then put the cursor over to the eastern extent of that. You're good. Just move the cursor over there and sample. Right. And I believe it's going to come up to be about 45 miles. Yeah. 43, 44 miles. So now you've turned, a fire that had a head of about 3 to 5 miles into one with multiple heads of 45 miles. And and more than 70% of all wildland fatalities occur due to a wind shift. And this is a good example of why there's so many.
Okay. This is the last.
Oh, did you want
Can we do the cross section?
Yes.
And while he's following up this cross section, I will kind of finish up on where we started the story, talking about that low-level thermal ridge and the overspreading mid-level speed max to the west. And I talked about that has been an indicator we have been using to forecast these type of events for about 5 years. But we did not really know or have a good understanding of the physical processes that made those features so important. It just so happened we had a paper in review on the low-level thermal ridge when this occurred. And as part of that process, we looked at a cross-section of the March 6th event. And this cross-section, it's not marked on there, but it runs from, north central New Mexico right through the Starbuck fire on the Kansas-Oklahoma state line, and then terminates southeast of Wichita, basically. So it's a west to east cross-section. And what you're looking at in cyan, those are the isotropes, potential temperature surfaces. Here are the Rocky Mountains out to the west. You see wind plotted on here. The color image is temperature, and then the black lines are lapse rates. And what we found was that this is at 19Z, and what we found was the importance of the mid-level speed max over spreading the low-level thermal ridge is, if you look at it isotropically, that high momentum air of around 18,000 feet or so is isotropically, if for no better term, it's associated with isotropic downglide. And then isotropes, potential temperature surfaces, literally fold right into the low-level thermal ridge, where you have dry adiabatic lapse rates, 9 to 10 degrees C. So it's almost this perfect coupling of the thermodynamic and the kinematic environment. And we now believe that that's the importance of the mid-level speed max, basically coupling with the low-level thermal ridge to give you the strongest winds and the downward momentum transfer right in an area where it's very unstable and low levels and very hot and dry.
Okay, do we have the takeaway slides we can throw up here before we go into some Q&A, and then I think we'll turn Rod up and sort of move into the panel piece. And I'll let
So those are the takeaways. I know I've heard Chad say this at conferences before that he believes, and I would definitely second that one of the biggest service improvements that we've seen from GOES-16 is certainly in fire meteorology. In fact, I think it may be cliche to say, but I think that it really will help revolutionize NWS fire services. I know we'll discuss more of that with Robin here in a moment. One of the big takeaways that I see from an operational standpoint is it really gives us the capability, we can really leverage the capability, especially when you combine it with Doppler radar network, to transition our fire services from strategic, providing long fuse watches and warnings, to a true tactical fire support. We can not only issue red flag warning, but we can issue potentially fire-specific warnings, is what we're seeing in the high resolution remote sensing. And one important component of that is that it's not range dependent like the ADATs. If you see a smoke plume or debris plume from a fire on radar, it's displaced from the actual fire because you have to wait for the smoke to get a sufficient altitude to be sampled by the radar. But here, you're basically seeing the surface conditions with GOES-16.
Okay, let's give Todd a round of applause.